The Shadow Apex, the complete history of Delta Force and Operation Absolute Resolve. Part 1. The Phantom in the Machine. In the world of international security, there are those who fight wars, and there are those who end them before they even begin. Most people know the name Delta Force from Hollywood movies or video games, but the reality is far more secretive, far more technical, and infinitely more dangerous. They are the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, officially designated as a Tier 1 Special Mission Unit. They are the silent professionals, the men who walk the fine line between order and chaos. Today, we are going deep into the shadows. We are going to explore the DNA of the most elite fighting force ever assembled, leading up to the most audacious military operation of the 21st century, the 2026 capture of Nicolás Maduro from the heart of Caracas. This was not just a raid, it was a 28-minute masterclass in modern warfare that changed the course of history. But to understand how they took a president from his palace, we first have to understand the man who dared to create a ghost. The architect of the elite, Charles Beckwith. The story of Delta Force begins not in Washington, but in the humid jungles of Vietnam. Colonel Charles Beckwith was a man who hated the big army bureaucracy. He saw that traditional infantry tactics were failing against a shadow enemy. In the early 1960s, Beckwith was sent on an exchange program with the British Special Air Service, SAS. What he saw there changed him. The SAS didn't care about shiny boots or saluting. They cared about one thing, the mission. They were professors of violence who could operate in small 4-man teams to dismantle entire armies. Beckwith returned to the United States with a burning vision. He wanted a unit that could operate with the same surgical precision. For over a decade, the Pentagon rejected his ideas, calling them elitist. But as the 1970s brought a wave of international terrorism, specifically the Munich Olympics massacre, the U.S. government realized they were defenseless against non-traditional threats. In 1977, the green light was finally given. Delta Force was born at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The crucible, the selection process. You do not apply to Delta Force, you are invited to try out. Most candidates are already highly decorated members of the 75th Ranger Regiment, or the Green Berets. Yet, even for these elite warriors, the failure rate for Delta selection remains consistently above 90%. The selection is not designed to find the strongest man, it is designed to find the man who cannot be broken. It begins in the rugged Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. The Long Walk. This is the legendary final test. A candidate is dropped off in the middle of nowhere with a 70-pound rucksack, a map, and a compass. He is given a set of coordinates and told to start walking. He is not told the time limit. He is not told how many miles he has left. He must navigate through dense forests and steep cliffs, often walking for over 20 hours straight without sleep. The psychological gauntlet. Those who finish the walk aren't greeted with a trophy. Instead, they are sat in a dark room and interrogated by a panel of psychologists and senior Delta operators. They want to see if the candidate has a Type A personality, but with the discipline to stay calm under extreme stress. They look for the quiet professional, the man who doesn't need a medal to know he is the best. Once selected, the Operator Training Course, OTC, begins. For 6 months, the candidates learn the art of the surgical strike. They spend thousands of hours in the Killing House, a maze of rooms where they practice clearing buildings with live ammunition. They learn high-speed driving, lockpicking, and the use of foreign languages. By the time they graduate, they are no longer just soldiers. They are the most versatile tools in the American arsenal. Shadows of the past, historical operations. Before we reach the events of 2026, we must examine the missions that forged Delta's reputation for unlimited reach. 1. Operation Eagle Claw, 1980. This was Delta's first major mission, intended to rescue 52 Americans held hostage in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, Iran. It was a logistical nightmare. A massive sandstorm in the desert led to a collision of a helicopter and a transport plane, killing 8 servicemen. The mission was aborted. While a failure, it led to a total overhaul of U.S. Special Operations. It forced the creation of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, who would later fly Delta into the heart of Caracas. Operation Acid Gambit, 1989. During the invasion of Panama, Delta was tasked with rescuing CIA operative Kurt Muse from the Carcel Model prison. In a display of pure speed, Delta operators landed on the roof of the prison via Little Bird helicopters, breached the cell, and extracted Muse in under 6 minutes. It remains one of the fastest and cleanest rescue missions in history. Operation Gothic Serpent, 1993, better known as the Black Hawk Down incident in Mogadishu, Somalia. While the mission turned into an 18-hour street battle, Delta operators showed their incredible skill. Operators Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart were posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for voluntarily fast-roping into a crash site to protect a downed pilot against thousands of armed militia. Their sacrifice cemented Delta's code: no man left behind. The hunt for HVTs, high-value targets. From pulling Saddam Hussein out of a hole in 2003 to the 2019 raid that ended ISIS leader Abu Baghdadi, Delta has been the primary choice for the most sensitive kill or capture missions. They are the ones the president calls when the target is too high profile to fail. The Road to Caracas, 2025 Geopolitics. By the end of 2025, Venezuela had reached a boiling point. Nicolás Maduro had been indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice on narco-terrorism charges, with a $15 million reward for his capture. But Maduro was no ordinary fugitive. He was shielded by the Fuerte Tiuna military complex, a fortress within a city. He was protected by Russian-trained Wagner Group mercenaries and Cuban intelligence officers. The U.S. military knew that a full-scale invasion would be a disaster. They needed a ghost. They needed a team that could bypass the most advanced Russian-made S-300 air defense systems, enter a sovereign capital, and extract a head of state without starting a world war. In November 2025, the order was signed. Operation Absolute Resolve was a go. Part 2. The Architecture of a Ghost Raid. With the weight of history behind them, the men of Delta Force began the most complex planning phase in the history of special operations. By late 2025, the geopolitical tension surrounding Venezuela had moved beyond simple sanctions. The United States National Security Council had determined that Nicolás Maduro was no longer just a political figure, but the head of a sophisticated transnational criminal organization that threatened the stability of the entire hemisphere. The mission, codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, was not designed to change a regime through force. It was designed to bring a fugitive to justice. But to do that, Delta would have to perform a miracle. They had to infiltrate Caracas, a city guarded by thousands of loyalist troops and a sophisticated Russian-made integrated air defense system, IADS. The first stage of preparation didn't involve guns or helicopters. It involved keyboards and satellites. The National Security Agency, NSA, and CIA began a massive coordinated effort to create a digital twin of Caracas. Using high-resolution LiDAR from orbiting satellites, they mapped every street, every alleyway, and every power line in the Venezuelan capital. This data was then fed into a supercomputer at Fort Liberty to create a virtual reality environment where Delta operators could walk through the city streets before they ever left American soil. They studied the patrol patterns of the Bolivarian National Guard, the timing of the traffic lights, and even the flicker of the street lights. Every detail mattered. However, the digital world only goes so far. To ensure absolute success, Delta required a physical training ground. In a remote, restricted section of a military forest in North Carolina, the Brimstone team, Delta's specialized engineering wing, constructed a 1-to-1 scale replica of Maduro's residence at the Fuerte Tiuna military complex. This was not a flimsy plywood mock-up. It was built with the same thickness of concrete, the same steel reinforcements in the doors, and the same interior layout as the actual palace. For 2 months, the operators of Alpha and Bravo squadrons lived and breathed this structure. They practiced breaching the safe room thousands of times. They experimented with different types of explosive charges to find the exact amount of pressure needed to blow a lock without killing the person on the other side. They used Blue Force tracking technology to monitor every operator's movement within the house, shaving milliseconds off their room clearing times until they reached a state of perfected synchronicity. While the operators trained, the technical specialists focused on the greatest obstacle: the S-300 and S-400 missile batteries protecting Caracas. These systems were designed to detect and destroy any aircraft within 250 miles of radius. To bypass them, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, Night Stalkers, prepared a new classified variant of the MH-60 Black Hawk, often referred to as the Stealth Hawk 2.0. These helicopters featured a radical angular design made from radar-absorbent composite materials, but the real secret lay in their active cancellation technology. These helicopters carried a suite of electronic warfare sensors that could capture an incoming radar wave and broadcast back a manipulated signal that made the helicopter appear to the radar as nothing more than a small bird or a gust of wind. This allowed the pilots to fly through the most heavily defended airspace in the world without ever triggering an alarm. The intelligence phase reached its peak with the recruitment of a high-level asset inside the Venezuelan military. This was a man codenamed Birdseye. He was a senior communications officer who had grown disillusioned with the regime. Through a series of clandestine dead drops and encrypted bursts, Birdseye provided the electronic keys to the palace. He revealed that Maduro's safe room was not just a bunker, it was a smart room controlled by a central security server. Birdseye provided the source code for the palace's biometric scanners, allowing the NSA to create spoofing devices that could trick the fingerprint and retina scanners into thinking a Delta operator was actually a high-ranking Venezuelan general. This meant that when Delta arrived at the final door, they wouldn't have to blow it open, they could simply walk in. As December 2025 drew to a close, the final pieces of the puzzle were moved into place. A dummy naval exercise was launched in the Caribbean to provide a cover for the arrival of the USS Iwo Jima, which would serve as the floating command center for the mission. On board the ship, the Delta operators checked their gear for the 100th time. They were equipped with the GPN VG-18 panoramic night vision goggles, which provided a 97-degree field of view, effectively turning the pitch-black night into a green-tinted daytime. Their primary weapon was the HK-416A8, a rifle so reliable it could fire 10,000 rounds without a single jam. Every operator also carried a personal electronic countermeasure device, a small box that would jam all cellular and radio signals within a 30-foot radius, ensuring that no guard could call for help once the raid began. The tension on the ship was palpable. This was more than a mission. It was a gamble with global consequences. If they succeeded, they would remove a dictator and bring him to justice. If they failed, it could lead to a catastrophic war and the loss of America's most elite warriors. On the night of January 2nd, 2026, the final weather window finally opened. A heavy tropical storm was moving toward Caracas, providing the perfect cover of cloud and rain to mask the sound of the helicopters. The go order was given. The Night Stalkers spun up their rotors, the Delta operators boarded the Stealth Hawks, and the Ghost Fleet vanished into the rainy night, heading towards the heart of the fortress.
Part 3. Chronicle of Silence, the 28-minute raid. As the clock struck 01:50 a.m. on January 3, 2026, the operation moved from the shadows of planning into the kinetic reality of war. The 4 MH-60M Stealth Hawks of the 160th SOAR were now deep within Venezuelan airspace, flying at a terrifying altitude of just 100 feet over the water and terrain to avoid detection. On board the lead aircraft, the Delta team leader received the final green light. The mission was no longer a rehearsal, it was history in the making. 2 a.m., the blackout. Exactly 10 minutes before the scheduled breach, a coordinated cyber assault struck Caracas. The city's electrical grid, already fragile, was dismantled from within. One by one, the lights of the capital flickered and died. The sovereignty of the night belonged entirely to the Americans. As the city fell into a forced slumber, the Stealth Hawks flared over the Fuerte Tiuna compound. The sound of the modified rotors was nothing more than a low hum against the tropical rain, but for the guards on the ground, it was the sound of the end. 2:10 a.m., the 47-second breach. Delta operators fast-roped onto the roof of the presidential residence with a speed that defied physics. They moved with violent precision. Using their GPN VG-18 panoramic goggles, the world was a clear, high-definition landscape of targets. Venezuelan guards, blinded by the total darkness and confused by the lack of communication, were neutralized before they could even chamber around. The team reached the primary objective, Maduro's reinforced safe room. This was the steel box they had practiced for months. Trump later revealed that the room was a masterpiece of Russian engineering designed to withstand a direct blast. But Delta didn't use a blast. They used a thermal lance and a specialized breaching charge that bypassed the locking pins in a display of sheer technical mastery. In exactly 47 seconds, the impenetrable steel door was breached. Operators flooded the room. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were discovered in a state of absolute shock. There was no last stand. Faced with the overwhelming presence of the world's most elite warriors, Maduro surrendered. The signal jackpot crackled over the secure satellite link to the USS Iwo Jima and the White House. 2:25 a.m., the fire corridor. The extraction, however, was hot. By now, the local Bolivarian Muhafez Birli, GNB, had realized the palace was under attack. Gun battles broke out in the courtyards as Delta's Bravo team held a perimeter. One U.S. helicopter was struck by ground fire, the metal skin of the aircraft shredding under the impact, but the pilot managed to keep it airborne, a testament to the skill of the Night Stalkers. The Delta teams didn't stay to fight a war. They were there for a retrieval. They loaded the high-value targets into the lead bird and lifted off into the rainy sky. By 3:39 a.m., the helicopters were back over open water, leaving behind a power vacuum and a stunned Venezuelan military. Epilogue: The Trial of a Century. By sunrise on January 3, 2026, the world was waking up to a different reality. Images began to circulate on social media, released by the Trump administration, of a blindfolded and handcuffed Nicolas Maduro aboard the USS Iwo Jima. The man who had ruled Venezuela with an iron fist for over a decade was now being processed like a common fugitive. On January 5, 2026, the world watched as Maduro was led into Manhattan federal court for his arraignment. Clad in a blue and orange prison uniform, he pleaded not guilty to charges of narco-terrorism and cocaine trafficking. Through an interpreter, he shouted that he was a prisoner of war,
a claim that was immediately dismissed by the U.S. prosecution, which framed the mission as a law enforcement operation. The aftermath. The raid, dubbed Absolute Resolve, remains a strategic inflection point. Militarily, it was a flawless execution, with no American lives lost despite the high risk. Politically, it has ignited a global firestorm. While the Venezuelan diaspora celebrated in the streets of Miami and Madrid, leaders in Russia, China, and even some European allies condemned the act as a violation of international law and national sovereignty. For Delta Force, there were no public celebrations. The operators returned to North Carolina, their identities remaining as secret as the day they joined the unit. They left behind a Venezuela in transition and a world that now knows one thing for certain. In the 21st century, there is no bunker deep enough and no palace strong enough to hide from those who move in the shadows.